water, earth, fire, air.
Hot glue. Hot glue is a great material. It's versatile, it dries super fast, and you probably have some on hand. But it can also be a great tool for sculpting. I'm going to show you how I made hot glue elementals that will look great on your table, but for the lesson portion, I'm going to throw it over to Smart Niche. Thanks, Hot Niche. The first step to building an elemental is making the armature. Hot glue sticks are sturdy and easy to cut. They make a great skeleton for your structure, especially if you want the end result to be transparent. All you need to do to make a hot glue armature is to cut it to the shape you want and then adhere it together with the glue gun. This can be as complex as you like. You can shape them down to make them thin or keep it as is. It's as easy as that. The second step is making bits. When it's hot, the glue becomes liquid and has a difficult time holding its shape. This can be a problem if you're trying to bulk out your form. That's why you need to make bits beforehand. Think of these like Lego pieces to build off of your armature. These are the two techniques that I used to make bits for this project. Technique 1.
Water.
If you pump hot glue directly into water, it will create interesting organic 3D shapes. Play around to get different results. Technique 2. Parchment. Hot glue doesn't stick to parchment paper, which means you can almost draw on the hot glue directly onto the paper and then peel it off later. All the forms will be two-dimensional because that's the way the glue sets, but you'll have a lot more control using this technique. Once you have your bits, you can start gluing them to the armature. Use the bits to build out the form. The great thing about this technique is that since everything is made out of the same material and it reacts to heat, the forms can easily be blended into one another. And that's all the techniques you need to know to get started. You can stop watching now or stay tuned to see how I made a fire elemental using these techniques. Let's get started on that. I wanted to be a little extra, so I started with an electric tea light. If you've ever crafted with tea lights before, you know how finicky they can be. I started by removing the cylindrical shell from the tea light. Whenever you use a knife, make sure you... I've cut myself. Well, that was fast. Once the shell was removed, I started making the armature. To make the bottom of the armature fit over the light, I hollowed it out with the tip of the glue gun. Then I adhered it in place. I continue building up the spine using slanted pieces to create a more interesting silhouette. Using some glue stick strips, I bulked out the torso area. This doesn't have to be pretty, I'm just roughing out the shape. Next, I glued in a neck to hold the elemental's fiery skull. Then I made some arms using the same techniques as before, and attached them in place. I made sure I was happy with the silhouette and pose before moving on. This took a little finagling. But once I was happy with that, I started filling in the gaps with leftover shavings. The goal here was to start blending the shapes together. The head was looking a little thick, so I shaved it down a little bit. Next, I took some choice bits that I made earlier using the water technique, and adhered them in place where I thought they'd look good. And then I blended them in using more hot glue. Throughout this build, I used the glue gun tip as a hot sculpting tool, adding texture and creating some swirling shapes to make it look more like fire. Next, I added a couple of bits that I made using the parchment technique. These were used mostly to make the fiery fingers. The flat shapes did take a little bit of negotiating to take the curve. Once they were in place, you blend. He's looking good. And look, it still works. And now it's time to paint. Ignore the base for now, I'll get to that later. Every tutorial I've seen recommends using inks for painting elementals, but I know a cheaper and much more time-consuming method. In the past, I've had success using layers of watered-down acrylic paint. All you need to do is apply the wash of paint and then wipe it away. Eventually, it will stain the hot glue. This didn't seem to work with yellow. I refuse to use good, reliable methods, so I went into my not crafting cupboard and pulled out some food coloring. This was fun to use, but worked just okay. I blended the colors together with a brush, and when I wiped it away, it was kind of yellow. But with a few more coats of food coloring, he was looking nice and spicy. The cardboard base was a bust, so instead I used some super glue and baking soda to make the tea light flush with the table. And then I started painting it. Is that the foreshadowing music from earlier? After painting, I went to test the light and... nothing. But I must fail so that you can succeed. So I performed surgery on the elemental and attached him to his new home. I was a lot more careful the second time around not to touch the mechanics of the tea light, but I was still afraid the same thing was going to happen again. Then I had the idea to hide the mechanics within a hollow hot glue shell. To do this, I created a piece using the parchment method, and connecting it from the base of the tea light to the middle of the fire elemental created a sort of roof. This fully enclosed the mechanics without gumming them up. I used this method a couple of times until it was fully enclosed, but once it was very easy to blend the shapes into the rest of the fire elemental. And I ended up liking the silhouette a lot more than I did before. Bonus! I painted his new fresh bottom with more food coloring and then gave him a coat of glossy Mod Podge. This seals in the color and makes him a little bit shiny! And finally, I painted the new super glue and baking soda base black, dry brushed it with a little bit of gray, and then a dry brush of orange to represent the light from the fire. And with that, it's time for the glamour shots. I think these are sick. They look comparable to ones on the market, maybe even a little better, and I made them with stuff I had lying around. If you're a DM, I know you're going to use elementals at some point, so why not try making them yourself? If you liked this video, please consider subscribing, and let me know what you'd like to see me make next time. Bye!